Welcome, and let's get right into it. We are staring down one of the biggest paradoxes of our time. Think about it. We need to feed a planet that's getting more crowded by the day, but the very gas that's changing our climate, carbon dioxide, is also what plants breathe. It's their food. So here's the billion-dollar question. Can we actually hack our crops to use all that extra CO2 to our advantage? Let's find out.
First, you have to understand the scale we're playing at. Global agriculture isn't just a big industry. It's a colossal $5 trillion engine that powers our entire civilization. That's its value every single year.
And what does that $5 trillion get us? Well, it translates to an almost unimaginable amount of food. We're talking nearly 10 billion tons of primary crops. Wheat, rice, corn, the whole shebang, pulled from the ground annually. Okay, but here's where the trouble starts. Climate change is a massive, massive threat to the system. In some of the worst-case warming scenarios, scientists are projecting that by 2100, we could see crop yields plummet by up to 25%. A quarter of our food, just gone, wiped out by heat, drought, and wild weather. And that brings us right back to the central paradox. CO2 in the atmosphere traps heat, which messes with the climate and is, really bad for crops. But plants breathe CO2. It's literally the building block of life. So could the problem, in a weird way, also be part of the solution? So this is the real heart of the matter. Can we actually engineer plants that are smart enough to grab all that extra carbon dioxide out of the air and turn it into more grain, more fruit, more of the food we need? And this is the important part. Can we do it without accidentally creating new problems, like food that's less nutritious or an environment that's even more out of whack? When scientists talk about making crops CO₂-efficient, they're really talking about a three-part goal. First, it's about getting more yield, more food from the extra CO2 that's just hanging around in the atmosphere. Second, it's about getting more bang for our buck, more calories for every ton of carbon we emit just by farming. And third, and maybe most importantly, it's about making sure these crops can actually handle the heat and not just survive, but thrive as the planet warms up. Now, let's look at the bright side for a minute. There's this phenomenon called the CO2 fertilization effect. And the simplest way to think about it is that for some plants, all this extra CO2 in the air is kind of like a free all-you-can-eat buffet.
And this buffet really splits the plant world in two. On one side, you have what are called C3 plants. Think wheat, rice, and soy. They run on an older, less efficient photosynthetic engine. So when you give them more CO2, they get a huge performance boost. On the other side, you've got C4 plants, like corn. They already have a modern turbocharged engine. More CO2 doesn't help them nearly as much, but they are naturally way better at dealing with high temperatures.
And look, this isn't just a theory. Scientists have been running these incredible experiments for years where they basically build open-air labs in farm fields and just pump in extra CO2. The results are pretty amazing. Those C3 crops, the wheat and the soy, consistently pump out 10 to 20% more food. And in some cases, it gets even better. One long-term study found that some specific varieties of rice, which is, a staple food for half the planet, saw their yields jump by as much as 35%. That just goes to show you the incredible potential that's locked away in their genes. Okay, so before we get too excited and declare the problem solved, we have to talk about the catch. And it's a big one. Actually, there are two: heat and nutrition. This is where that simple story of more CO2 is good for plants falls apart. See, in a real field, not a controlled experiment, CO2 doesn't just appear out of nowhere. The same gas that's feeding the plants is also trapping heat, drying out the soil, and fueling the crazy weather that can kill an entire harvest. And what we're now learning is that all that heat and drought can completely cancel out any benefit the plant got from the extra CO2 in the first place. And then there's the second problem, and this one is a little sneakier. It turns out that when plants grow bigger and faster with more CO2, they're basically packing on carbs. The yield, the sheer weight of the grain, goes up. But the good stuff inside, the protein, the iron, the zinc, that actually goes down. It's this really worrying trade-off. This leads to what a lot of scientists are now calling the empty calories problem. And here's the frightening paradox. We might actually produce enough food to stop hunger, but accidentally trigger a global malnutrition crisis. We'd have bigger harvests, but every single bite would have less of the vital stuff our bodies need to be healthy. For people who rely on these staple crops for almost all their nutrients, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So, yeah, the problem is incredibly complex. But this is exactly where science is rolling up its sleeves. Let's look at the cutting edge of research to see how scientists are trying to engineer the food of tomorrow, food that can get us the best of both worlds. And the strategy is really a three-pronged attack. It all starts with smarter, faster, more targeted breeding programs. From there, it moves into what sounds like total science fiction, literally re-engineering the fundamental process of photosynthesis. And finally, all that lab work has to connect back to the real world with smarter, data-driven farming. And when I say science fiction, I mean it. There are massive international projects right now trying to give rice the super efficient C4 engine that corn has. Others are using gene editing tools like CRISPR to fix a notoriously slow and clunky enzyme called rubisco, which is at the heart of photosynthesis. They're even designing plants from scratch to have deeper roots to find water and to lose less water through their leaves. It's a complete redesign of the plant's basic operating system. But all of this incredible science brings up a completely different and maybe even trickier set of questions. Because inventing a supercrop is one thing, deciding who gets to benefit from it is another thing entirely. We have to ask, who is going to own the keys to this new climate-proof harvest? The amount of money on the table is just staggering. Right now, the global seed market is worth over $70 billion, and it's on track to blow past $100 billion in just the next few years. That means any company that cracks the code and patents a climate-proof superseed will be holding one of the most valuable assets on Earth. Now, compare that $100 billion market with this number. The UN estimates that the hidden costs of our current food system, things like environmental damage, health problems from poor nutrition, add up to about $10 trillion a year. So the big question is, will these new superseeds help us shrink that $10 trillion problem, or will they just become another part of the $100 billion market? And that really brings us to the sharpest point of all. If we do it, if scientists have a breakthrough and invent a genuinely climate-proof superseed, what happens then? Is it a tool for all of humanity, shared openly? Or is it a patented product that only the richest farmers and the wealthiest countries can afford to buy? The answer to that question will define global food security for the next century. So when you put it all together, the science, the money, the ethics, you can start to see a few very different futures taking shape. Let's just game out 3 possible scenarios for what our world might look like by the year 2100. In one future, you get what you could call the unequal boom. Wealthy nations use these expensive, patented supercrops and do just fine. But everywhere else, the nutrition gap gets wider and wider. A better path is the resilient transition, where public science and open-source breeding help everyone adapt with a wider variety of nutritious crops. But there's also a much darker future, the climate shock, where our innovation just can't keep up with the pace of climate change, leading to constant food shortages and chaos. At the end of the day, this is what it all boils down to. The science is incredible, and the potential is definitely there. But technology by itself isn't going to save us. As the source material for this explainer so powerfully puts it, it won't stop billions of people from being stuck between a hotter planet and a thinner bowl of rice. The real billion-dollar question isn't just about whether we can engineer a better crop. It's whether we have the wisdom to build a system that uses that technology to feed everyone well. That choice is up to us.